All right, welcome. Trade deadline. What's going to happen? This is part one. I'm doing the Atlantic. I didn't want to do a really long video, and I felt like I summed up a little too much when I did it last year, all in like 25 minutes or so. So we're looking at the Atlantic. In green, you got the buyers. In red, you got the sellers, and we'll dive into it. This is just going by standings, right? So first through four, 5 through 8. Starting off with the Bruins. Bruins don't have too many needs. They'll be looking for a 1C or a 2C as in center. They they have some assets compared to some of the other teams. They have some appealing assets, I guess, but it's not too many. So starting off, you got Jake DeBrusk on an expiring $4 million contract. He can be a 25 to 30 goal scorer. He's got speed. Doesn't necessarily fit the Bruin system to a T, but could be a good fit elsewhere. Really thinking Edmonton would be a fantastic fit. I don't know who you get in exchange. Maybe Warren Fogle, but whatever. Number 2, I got Matt Grzelcyk, again an expiring contract. Remember, he was scratched last year for most of the playoffs because he was considered the 7th defenseman by Coach Montgomery in the playoffs. What do we see from him this year? We've seen kind of stagnant play. We've seen very good play, and we've seen not so great play. I say he has an expiring contract. You trade him while he has value. You'll be all right. The Bruins have a good defensive depth. They'll be okay, even without Grzelcyk. Remember, Forbert still on the IR, should be coming back soon as a third pairing defenseman. Next up, I got Danton Heinen. I'm not quite sure they trade Danton Heinen, but expiring contract. He's playing extremely well lately. Could have some value at the trade deadline if you need to package him in a deal. Picks are not super. They don't have a ton of picks, but they do have picks to trade. We always see that with buyers. They'll sacrifice picks and draft picks for their future and for the now. Don Sweeney, the GM of the Bruins, always gets defensive depth, no matter how many defensemen he has. And you have like 10 or so guys that can play in the NHL right now that are not on the IR, so that does not include Forbert. I'm sure he'll go out and get another depth defenseman, which there's an argument you can never have too many depth defensemen, but at what point is that not valid? Because I feel like 10 is a lot. You're not going to see all 10 of those guys in the playoffs. We could see a goalie go. Allmark, 2 years left at $5 million, having a decent season. A down year for him in general, statistically wise, throughout his entire career. Again, 2 years, $5 million. He still has quite a bit of value on the market right now, and he's a very good goalie. Swayman, restricted free agent at the end of the year. There were arbitration issues last season, so we could see a goalie swap in Boston. Personally, I'd like to see Brandon Bussi called up from the AHL. Not having the best season in the AHL, but the Providence Bruins defense hasn't been elite this year. Hasn't been great. It's been great in years past. So goaltenders often suffer as a result. So I'd still like to see Brandon Bussi up, at least play a game or two, see what you have in him at the NHL level. At the very least, just scratch the surface of that. But we could just see a goaltending swap in Boston, backup for backup type thing. Panthers, second place. They could be looking for a left wing. Their left wing depth is it's not great. Defense and depth scoring, both kind of needs. They don't have a whole lot of pieces to trade. Obviously, they have picks, but they have like a bunch of fourth-line guys: Lorenz, Stetlin, Ryan Lomberg. You got Spencer Knight in the AHL, who may attract some value, although the contract's a little high, and if he's not an NHL player, then I don't know how much of a risk a team is willing to take on Spencer Knight's cap hit. We'll see, but it could be interesting. They have currently Bobrovsky and Stolars in net right now, so we'll see what happens with that. And I put Anton Lundell up there. Lundell, young kid, talented two-way centerman, having a very down year, but has showed flashes of great upside. This could be one of those things where the Panthers go out, have to package a player like Lundell with a picks to a team that is looking for their future number 2 or 3 center, right, in order to get the player they want. So I put Lundell up there. Again, restricted free agent at the end of this year. Potential they trade him. Not having a good season. He's doing fine defensively. I've seen him play. He's doing all right defensively. But you want more scoring from him than you've been getting, and he's shown that he can score at a higher rate than he has so far. Leafs looking for defense, goaltending, and depth scoring, specifically a left winger. The left wing depth right now is it's not great. Could definitely use a left winger on any line. I left it pretty vague. I think you can kind of get by without having a left winger of elite talent, excluding Bertuzzi, on the top two lines. I think you can get away with Yarncrook or Nyes on that first line with Matthews and Marner. So specifically depth scoring left wing. Players that go, well, all right. So their goaltending, you could be looking for like a 1A, 1B scenario. I'm thinking more of like, I don't know, like a Swayman Allmark type thing, or I don't know. Anyway, goaltending, you have Wall, he's on the IR. You have Samsonov or however it's pronounced now, it keeps changing. He's in the AHL, which I have as potential trade bait. A team may be interested in picking up Samsonov because he is an NHL caliber goaltender, but at this point, better suited as a backup goalie, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of value in backup goaltenders, but they could be looking for another goaltender to split the starts with Wall. And defense, personally, I think they should be looking internally for forward defense. I talk about this probably more than I should, but they'll probably just pick up a defenseman and think it'll help them. It'll change their fortunes like they do every year, and it does not. But I can see them going out and getting a defenseman. In terms of who they could trade, I have Tyler Bertuzzi listed as number one. Again, you need a replacement left wing, so I don't know how likely that is. Bertuzzi can be a very good scorer, can be gritty, physical. His defense, questionable at times, but can be good. This could be a key trade cog for them. Martin Jones, doing all right as the Leafs' primary goaltender at the moment. Could be trade bait to get one of those second or 1B goaltenders in if you have to do a goalie swap. Martin Jones can be a backup goaltender. Again, Samsonov, picks. Leafs probably going to trade picks to get the players they want. And I have Liljegren up here. I don't know how likely this is. I like Liljegren. I think he's been pretty solid in terms of his play. Is he elite? No. Is he a first pairing defenseman? No. But he's one of those guys that can play in the bottom four pairings on a defensive team and not look out of place. He's young. I think he's a restricted free agent at the end of this year. He might have arbitration rights. I don't quite remember. But that is one of those guys that might need to be added as a sweetener in a deal, right? If you're going for like a solid second line defensive pairing player, Liljegren could be that guy to bundle in, or maybe even like a first line player, right? Because you have TJ Brody on an expiring contract as well. I don't see them trading Brody. I think if he's one of the key pieces to help them in the playoffs. When they make it to the playoffs, I think he's a key part of that team and that defensive core. I don't see Brody being traded. Next up is the Lightning, Tampa Bay. I think at this point they'll be looking for defense and bottom six forward. They have a lot of fourth line capable players, but they'll probably be looking for a third line winger. They have Cirelli as the third line center, who is an excellent third line center. No need to. No need to replace that position. You have a great third-line center, but specifically third-line wingers that can produce some depth scoring. You have a ton of fourth-line guys. You have some fourth-line guys playing on the third line. Hasn't worked out all that well. So I think they don't have to spend too much, but you have a guy like Esimont on that third line. He's a fourth-line grinder, physical kind of guy. So there's some guys that are a little out of place at the moment. Possible trade bait. I had to put Stamkos up. I don't think Stamkos will get traded. Obviously, if talks go sour or whatever you have, and there's some bad divorce vibes going on, Stamkos could be traded. But I honestly do not see this happening. But he's always in rumors and stuff, so I have him on the board because you never know, and it's not even halfway through the season yet. We've seen the trade deadline start earlier in the past couple of seasons, so I wanted to get this up. Stamkos, I don't think gets traded. However, Tyler Mott, I could see getting traded, expiring contract. Calvin DeHaan hasn't been the defenseman they want. Serviceable NHL defenseman, but at this point, maybe a third line / depth defenseman. And you're not even getting third line defenseman play out of DeHaan every single night. Philippe Myers expiring contract. I like Myers, but it's one of those things, right? Austin Watson, fourth line physical guy, a team looking to get bigger and a little more physical for the playoffs. Austin Watson will be an appealing player. Hayden Fleury has played well late with the Lightning this year. He's been hurt. Could be an interesting pickup for a team, one of those cheaper assets to pick up, and could play a pretty decent role. I could see Fleury actually going to the Leafs. I know inter-division trades aren't super common, but this is one of those trades that I think could make sense for both teams. And picks, Tampa likes to throw all their picks away. We know this. They don't really have picks, so I have question marks. What picks are you going to give? Your next first round is the 2026 first round you can trade. I don't know, and it's a conditional pick, so you have to have a condition in there. It's conditional between, I think, 2025, 2026, depending on what the team they traded the other pick to decides. I don't even remember. I'm not diving into the picks of the Lightning because that's a whole rabbit hole I'm not getting into, but we'll see with Tampa. I think they have enough currently on their roster to get into the playoffs, but they need more defense from their from their D-men. I don't think their D-men have been living up to their potential in their own zone. A lot of focus on D-men jumping up into the play. Specifically, Mikhail Sergachev hops up a lot into the play, and he's very talented offensively, but it really leaves a void in their own defensive zone, and that leads to goals against. So you got to weigh the pros and cons. I don't know. I think Tampa will be fine. I don't think they'll be overly active. Next up, Red Wings, first team I have selling. I think they're going to be looking for picks in the future. Again, these are projections. The season isn't halfway over. If the Red Wings go on like a 10, 15 game winning streak, they're immediately buyers. Like, they're going for it. They're in the playoffs. They want to win a round in the playoffs. Probably not Stanley Cup contenders even if they do go on a run, but nonetheless, got to give those fans something to cheer for. I wore my Red Wings jersey today, my Zetterlund jersey. Possible trade pieces, though. David Perron, I could see being on the move. One of those guys that can help a struggling power play, can play really anywhere in the top 9 in terms of the wing. I got Shane Gostisbehere, can quarterback a power play, again, expiring contract. Isn't a great defensive defenseman, but serviceable and not the worst in his own zone. He's capable of making pretty good defensive plays. I'd say he's slightly below league average, but that's still pretty solid for the offensive production you get from this type of player. Daniel Sprong, I don't know if they trade Sprong. Personally, I would keep Sprong. He's a cheap player with some upside. He's shown he can produce at a 20-goal rate in not necessarily a top 6 role. I think you keep Sprong. You see what he has. James Reimer, again, great backup, but he is a backup. You could trade him backup for backup. Had a down year last year with the Sharks because the Sharks are an abysmal mess on defense. Having a down year with the Red Wings. Red Wings having a little trouble defending this year. But also too much pressure put on James Reimer, I think. Too much is expected of him in terms of his games played and his consistent performance. Great backup goaltender, so I could see him being trade bait as well. And Christian Fischer, one of those depth center guys. Some teams love their depth centers. Could see him getting traded as well. Expiring contract, not a whole lot of value there. But nonetheless, you can get something rather than nothing. Canadians, I don't think they're going to be making a push for the playoffs. And I don't think it's the right time for them to do that as well. They don't have a whole lot to necessarily trade off. So I have surprises in here. You could see one of those guys, like, with some term left, getting traded from Montreal. Why? Because they need cap space. They've been trying to get out of their cap hell for a few years. They're getting better, but there's still a long way to go. They still have some contracts that are a little pricey. Still don't have a whole lot of cap space. So they'll be looking for cap space. They'll be looking for picks and futures as well. So purely a team that's selling. They have a lot of pieces already. I don't think they need to do a lot of buying. You got to let those pieces develop and grow at an NHL level like they have been doing. It's showing positive results. I think you stay on that path. In a year or two, I think you're talking about maybe being a wild card team, but keep building to sustain that success for the future. Trade candidates, I got Sean Monahan up there. I don't know. I think if you're looking to trade, dump off cap space, get a decent return because of the bounce back Sean Monahan's had, you can get a decent amount for Sean Monahan. You're not going to get a haul, but you're going to get something, right? And it's going to be something somewhat valuable. On the other hand, the Canadians really like Monahan. Monahan really likes Montreal. It might not be one of those trades that comes to fruition because the fit is so good. We might not see a Monahan trade. So there's people, it's a very polarizing thing. There are people that adamantly think Monahan should remain in Montreal. It'd be a huge mistake to trade him. And then there are people that really think he should be traded. This is the perfect time to trade him. Bounce back player. This is why you go out and acquire Monahan to begin with. So I don't know. I don't have any insight to that. Pezzetta, again, one of those guys that can provide depth, grit, physical play, good for a team looking to get bigger for the playoffs. Pezzetta could be a trade piece. I like Pezzetta personally. So as a Bruins fan, I hate Pezzetta. I think he's he's too physical, man. He bullies my Bruins, but in general, he is a great player. I'm really high on Pezzetta. I do like him a lot. There are sometimes maybe his physicality can cross the line a bit, but at the same time, in a fourth line role, more of like an enforcer defensive role, I think he's fine. Plus, I like his whole hair scene. He's got a nice head of lettuce over there. I got Savard up there too. Again, he has a year left after this year on his contract. Is a minute eater. I think he gets some type of haul, especially to a team. I don't want to say Tampa could be looking for a player like that, but he come from Tampa, right? So I don't know how likely that is, but a team looking for a top four defenseman, or even like a third pairing defenseman. I think he's better suited for maybe a second pairing defenseman. But nonetheless, one of those guys that can kind of play anywhere in your defensive lineup and be successful at it. So I think you can get a decent amount for Savard. Cap hit's not too high. Moving on to the Sabres. Now, the Sabres could go either way depending on how their season goes in the next month or so, couple months. I have them as buyers. There's pressure on this team to be in the playoffs, just to make the playoffs, not to be a Stanley Cup contender. They were close last year. They have a lot of the pieces already producing at a good clip. It's getting to the point where you're going to have to start paying some of these guys, most notably Casey Middlestat, right, who is currently a restricted free agent at the end of this year, and your third line center. Right, so not only should he see an increased role on the team, but he's going to get a pretty decent pay raise, and rightfully so. So I don't know. I think they're going to go out and buy. They really need to work on their defense and goaltending. Personally, again, kind of like the Leafs, kind of like what we're going to talk about with the Senators, it's their forward group that is not playing defense. I don't think their defensive core is necessarily the issue. Yes, you got younger guys on the team. You got, even Dahlin isn't perfect on defense. He still grows and gets better in his own zone every single year. That's normal. Owen Power, very young defenseman, is making a lot of mistakes in his own zone, but showing flashes of brilliance in his own zone as well. So you got the pieces there for the future. You keep building up. The team should continually get better, but it's not. So I think they go out, they get defense, they try to find a replacement goaltending. I don't think either of them necessarily help, but I think that's what they do. Tradables, they got Olofsson, expiring contract, having a down year, can score at a decent clip. I got Gergensons, again, good fourth line depth player for a team looking to compete in the playoffs. I love Gergensons and the Sabres just go hand in hand. Like, Gergensons is forever a Buffalo Sabres player in my mind. I don't know. I know he hasn't spent his whole career there, but he is a Buffalo Sabres player. I would be heartbroken if he got traded from Buffalo, but it's possible. Eric Johnson could be one of those players, again, expiring contract. Could see some type of return for Eric Johnson. I don't know how likely that is. Johnson, older player. What's he making, like $5 million against the cap or something? There will be teams calling for Eric Johnson, but at what point do you trade him? I really like Eric Johnson. I don't think he's an elite player, but nonetheless, like, he's a pretty solid defenseman. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, I think we could see on the move. There are a lot of teams with a lot of goaltenders that are there's a lot of goaltending issues around the league. There are teams with a lot of underperforming goaltenders, and there are a lot of teams looking for new goaltenders to replace or supplement. And then there are some teams that with multiple goaltenders that are performing well or overperforming. So we you don't usually see goaltenders traded at or around the deadline. That's usually an off-season thing. But this year, it feels like it keeps building. We saw this issue last year, and then not a whole lot was done in the offseason, and it just continually gets worse. There are a lot of teams that are looking for goaltending. There are a lot of teams that are, I don't want to say a lot, but there are some teams that have kind of a surplus of goaltending at the moment. So we could see Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen on the move, maybe for another goaltender, maybe one of those 1B, 1A scenarios. You got Devin Levi. I think at this point with the Sabres, you're looking for some type of starting caliber goalie. You have Devin Levi. He can be your future starting number one goaltender, but he's young. He's going to take time to develop. I also have Eric Comrie up here, who is in the AHL. Again, it's one of those things, Buffalo and Ottawa make it very tough on their goaltenders. You have good goaltenders come into these organizations and put up sub-900 save percentages and then leave and resume their great career. That's not necessarily a reflection on the goaltenders themselves. That's more a reflection on the team playing in front of them. We saw that with Philip Gustafson and Cam Talbot in Ottawa. We've seen that with somewhat Linus Ullmark in Buffalo. We saw that a bit with Carter Hutton in Buffalo. So, it's kind of an issue there. I also have Tyson Jost, one of those depth forwards. I don't know. I don't necessarily see a team calling for Jost, but one of those guys, like if he's in the AHL, they can afford the extra $600,000 to have a buried penalty. And a forward who can play in the NHL reliably that you can call up, can kind of jump into a bottom six role anywhere. He's a natural center, but plays a lot of wing as well. I think that's one of those guys you can call up. Good depth, good sneaky depth pickup if anyone picks him up. And last up, I got the Ottawa Senators selling, looking for futures, defense, and goaltending. Again, same argument with the Leafs, Sabres, and Senators. The defensive play you're getting from your forwards is inadequate and subpar. It's close to league worst in my opinion. Like it's not good for either of these teams. The offense of the Senators, the offense of the Sabres, the offense of the Leafs, I think are fine. I don't think you need to do a whole lot there. Senators probably looking for futures, defense, goaltending. I think I just said that. Again, I think they'll go out, maybe try to get a defenseman. I wanted to kind of put this team as a buyer because we don't know. The pressure on this team to be in the playoffs, they were supposed to be in the playoffs 2 years ago and then last year, and then they were supposed to be in the playoffs this year, and now they're in last place in their own division. There's definitely pressure in Ottawa to win, and there should be there should be with some of the players they have, and I don't know, man. So we could see them go out and be buyers. I don't think they're in any type of position to be buying to make a push for the playoffs this year, but maybe in the next year or two. So maybe a guy with term or restricted free agent they could look at picking up, which is why I have futures. I do think they'll try to find a defenseman. I do think Brandstrom will be on his way out, restricted free agent. This has been talked about for, 2 years now? And I think they'll go out and try to find some type of goalie solution. And I don't think whatever goalie they bring in will be the answer. I could see them trading Tarasenko, expiring contract, $5 million a year. That could go either way. We don't know how much Tarasenko really wants to stay in Ottawa or go back and test the free agent market, because he might get more than $5 million on the free agent market. I haven't done an assessment on him, so I'm not sure. Dominic Kubalik, could you trade him? That was a trade from Detroit. So do you go and flip him and kind of make that prior deal that you got Kubalik from look better? The DeBrincat deal. We could be interesting. Kubalik isn't a bad player. Could we see the rights of Shane Pinto traded? Pinto looks like he'll be entering the unrestricted free agent market because he will not accumulate enough games. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. I haven't read up too much on that. But nonetheless, Pinto's rights could be traded. Or they could stick with Pinto. He should be a cheaper player to re-sign and should be producing at a decent clip, maybe a third-line center role to jump back into. So bargain contract, but, there's already baggage there, right? Brandstrom, we could see Forsberg on the way out. Corpusalo, they signed for what? It was a 4x4 or something like that, making $4 million a year. You can't trade that contract. There's no way like anyone will bite on that contract. You're still paying Matt Murray his contract. So you could see Forsberg gone. I think Forsberg is a bright spot in the goaltending industry. Forsberg could fit another team very well. And I think you could trade picks to really get the player you want. You can bundle it. You can get picks. You can trade picks. But I think you're looking for prospects that have already been drafted and have bright futures and are closer to making an NHL appearance, if not already young players in the NHL. So that's the Atlantic. I didn't put every single person that was on an expiring contract up here. There are plenty I didn't put on. And there are some guys with term on their contracts that are on this board. Take this with a grain of salt. Rumor mills haven't started a whole lot yet, but it was about this time last year we saw the first big domino fall. We could see that again this year. Wouldn't surprise me too much. But that's the Atlantic. Obviously, if there's anyone I missed, let me know. If there's any of these guys on the board you don't think should be up here, let me know. This is kind of opinion-ish / contract / watching the team / needs. So, there's a little bit of everything kind of mixed in there. See, we're at 27.5 minutes, so it's a good thing I didn't do the whole thing. So that's what I got. What's your team? Who do you want? If you're a Red Wings fan, are you buying or are you selling? So again, buying, selling, these are mostly my opinions. Playoff teams usually buy. Non-playoff teams usually sell unless there's an extenuating circumstance. We could see the Sabres buy, so that's why they could be selling off picks up here. But honestly, I think they're sellers. I think the Sabres should be sellers, but I think they will buy. Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you, guys. I'll see you for the Metropolitan Division up next. Take care, right?